have to discuss that. Oh, David Cay Johnston has joined us, but I think he's holed up in what city are you holed up in? Oh, your sound. You need to turn your sound on. Mike.
Your mic's disconnected. We're all getting tech savvy now that we're home all the time.
Yeah. No can hear.
Oh, wait. That's because he muted when he took his...
Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Now I'm mute.
Turn the mute button. Mute button. We can't turn his mute button on, can we?
No, I can't do that one.
Oh, his mute button. Anyway, he'll be back. But he's holed up in some... I think he's in Vermont or somewhere like that, holed up there because same problem.
I think he's up near Rochester, isn't he?
I don't know. We'll ask him when he comes on. He was a former Pulitzer Prize winner, New York Times bestseller, by the way. So I got a couple of his books. I don't know if you've met him, but an interesting character. Anyway, he'll be on as soon as he gets his mic. Okay, so you're holed up in St. Paul, and I've been there, obviously. And introduce you to Rana. Rana is a PhD graduate in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, right? And Dr. Rackner is works with physicians and financial advisors. That's like getting oil and vinegar to mix, which has got to be a very interesting challenge. And by the way, everybody loved your speech the other day, and I'm glad we did a special. I'm glad we were able to do a special on that. And I told Rana we need to do a special on Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Dr. Reckner, have you ever been to Malaysia? Before I step into it again, have you ever been to Malaysia or that part of the world?
I was in Thailand, Vietnam, but I would love to go to Malaysia. I actually operated in Bangkok. It was a fascinating experience.
Yeah. Okay. Because the thing is, some of the people have traveled. David, is your mic on now, or is your mic?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yes. Right.
All right.
Right.
Sorry about that. I was trying to use my AirPods, and that didn't work.
Yeah. And what city are you holed in right now?
We live 5 blocks outside of Rochester, New York, in a little community called Brighton.
Yeah, right. And just to introduce you, Raina is in Kuala Lumpur. He's a PhD in Kuala Lumpur. Terry is in Salt Lake City, CPA out of Salt Lake. And Dr. Rackner is in St. Paul. And she's holed up in St. Paul because she can't get her flights back to California yet, which is an issue. And
you can't get any flights? The airlines are required to fly a minimum number of flights to get their subsidy.
I have a Midwest base and a West Coast base, so I'm here for now.
I see. Okay.
I'm just doing it. And David Cay Johnston is a Pulitzer Prize winner, a New York Times bestseller, author of, I have it back here, Trump, The Making of Donald Trump, which is
among other books, yeah.
Among other books, yes. And I have this book I found out a long time ago called Perfectly Legal.
Do we get to blame him?
About Donald Trump? Yeah.
Yeah.
We blame the election on David Cay Johnston. He's the guy who got Donald
Trump. Or Donald said I tried to keep him from going to the White House and I failed, and he's right. I failed.
Oh, okay.
No question about it.
Well, anyway,
most people are unaware, as I report in my book, that Donald was involved up to his eyeballs with an international drug trafficker he did favors for. And it's very clear that he was in the drug trafficking business. He just, like most of the people who put up the money, did not get charged. There are lots of wealthy Americans in that business. He put the life of his own grandnephew in jeopardy. The child was born with serious health defects, and he took away the health coverage in an effort to leverage relatives into giving him more money. And a judge had to intervene to save the child's life. And Trump's response to that was, well, what's wrong with what I did? I mean, these people, they were causing me problems. And he said, utterly immoral. And the only known case of cheating at Atlantic City Casino was at Trump Castle, which I documented back in 1992 in my book, Temples of Chance, which is about a third Trump. And
so he was actually
America Inc. bought out Murder Inc. to take over the casino business.
I'm sorry I opened the can of worms here.
He was in the pharmaceutical industry, and he's also in the gaming industry.
That would be the polite way to put it, Nick.
What? pharmaceutical and gaming industry.
Right.
Right. Okay. So he had involvements, but he's been involved in a lot of things. Now, as a leader to take on coronavirus, I think we had Ankit showed the report. Okay, because we always like to look at demographics. Let me see if I can bring Ankit back and see. Oh, let's see. Oh, wait. I got too many people on. I got to strike one. I would strike myself if I could.
No, I'll strike my.
No, stay around.
Okay, I can go because a long time I stay with you. Thank you. It's a nice discussion.
Okay. Yeah,
Thank
and
Come
Raina,
back.
we want you back to do a special on Malaysia, specifically on
thank you.
Malaysia, because a lot of our viewers, you're getting a lot of these people that you've seen. Yeah, they know about Malaysia, but let me tell you, there's a lot of people in the United States who have never heard of it. They can't find it on a map. So we're going to bring you back to do a special on Malaysia. Okay.
Yeah, and I want to see everyone in Malaysia. Definitely, we will arrange a very good party for you. Here, delicious food, delicious, like everything is very beautiful. Hopefully, you will enjoy.
We're going to have a party in Kuala Lumpur as soon as this is over with. I'm getting my tickets.
Yeah, thank you.
A discount. All right, we'll see you back.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, all right. So now let's see.
So the
Okay,
U.S. has less than 5% of the world population and about 80% of the attributed deaths. I'm sorry, about 28%. 28%.
You know, if this was my report card, I was grading this student, I would say that he hadn't done too well, because if you look at the United States, and again, somebody pointed out that you look at deaths per million, and which is the real indicator, and we're looking around 244. But then as I go down to Malaysia, Ankit, if you could scroll down to Malaysia, it's just right past Australia. Okay. It's down a ways here. Okay, wait. Stop. Yeah, as soon as you get to Egypt, I can see it. Look at Malaysia, where Raina is from. The total amount of death is 109. The population is 30 million people. Okay, deaths per million is about half of what it is. Wait, less than that. In the United States, like 3 per million. In other words, they've done a tremendous job. So has Australia in terms of containing the coronavirus. Why is it?
Well, go to Hong Kong. Go look at Hong Kong.
Yeah, Hong Kong, right? Yeah, Rakesha's here. He was on earlier today. But
Or maybe the fairest one to go to is South Korea, because they reported their first confirmed case the same way the U.S. did. And I think you're going to see about 260 deaths in South Korea, which would translate in the U.S., adjusted for population, to about 1,600 instead of 81,000.
Right, exactly. And then see that's the math I was looking at, David. I was saying, if you look at the math, our numbers are way high. I mean, we're astronomically higher than some of these other countries that we've had on our show. Because Rakesh is showing me, hey, Hong Kong doesn't have hardly any. Malaysia, Raina just came from Malaysia. They don't have hardly any, and same with Willie Hill from Australia. And then we look at the United States, we're like way up there. So
we're beyond way up there. We're like leaders 100 times more than anyone else.
Okay, so is we have I got put on the spot. We have Dr. Wagner. Is this a failure of our medical community or failure of our leadership? Or what's your thoughts on that?
I would say a little of both. You know, if you take a look at South Korea, there was a point at which they were doing 50,000 tests a day. And without the data that we really need, it makes it difficult to contain the virus. So why is it we have not been able to test our population? I think this is a core challenge. Nick, you probably have opinions about whether this is medical or political or both. What do you think?
Wait. You want to know what I think?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, okay. About why we're a complete abject failure in the well, one thing I do know, because I just look at data, and the thing is, the data shows we're the most expensive healthcare system in the world. Okay, the data shows that the coronavirus, we are one of the highest in terms of amount, but not the highest per million population. And I think what happened is, looking at just the data, and see, the real problem with data, Dr. Reckner, is, you don't ever get, and Terry can tell us this because Terry works with data all the time, you don't get all the right data sometimes the first time. You have to pull the data out, and then sometimes you find it's corrupted, it's not correct. So the data is important. The data,
there's a big difference between data and information.
Yeah, we get information, and sometimes and you got to keep culling through it to find the right. The information that I received, and again, haven't been able to verify that. That's the reason I have people like David Johnson. He actually goes around and he snoops around to find out facts, okay? And no one does that unless you're an investigative reporter, which I'm not, okay? But that, from what I understand, we had a pandemic team out there at one time, and it was dismissed in 2018, okay? That is not good leadership, whoever did that, because the pandemic, because we had this crazy guy called Bill Gates running around the country doing TED Talks saying, oh, the biggest problem we're going to face, and no one listened to this guy because he doesn't know anything, is a pandemic. And he went to every TED Talk, the biggest thing we're facing is a pandemic. No one listened to him. Okay, so this is blazing out there on TED Talks. Okay, and then there's this pandemic team. In other words, the first response team, which South Korea took very seriously, and we dismissed them completely. And then, and this is a problem I had, the minute now this came about, it's a at that point in time, it is a medical problem. And so who's in charge? Mike Pence, a politician from Indianapolis. Dr. Wagner, if you had a medical condition, are you going to go see your mayor about that? Would you do that? Okay. In other words, you found out that you have a virus or you may have cancer. So you're going to go see the mayor of St. Paul because he's going to help you, right? Wrong.
Well, you know, it's very interesting because we are letting medical choices be made by politicians. It's sort of like the politics legislating third trimester abortion. I mean, who should make the decision about when elective cases should resume? So this line between what's good for a community and what the best medical choice is not clear to me. Those decisions are really in the right hands.
Yeah, and see, for me, and maybe because you asked my opinion, if I have a medical condition or there's a medical problem, the first thing our leader would point to would not be the vice president. I'm sure he's a great vice president. At least half the country thinks so, or maybe less. I would point to, here's my team, and I'd have a whole stack of medical doctors. Look, I mean, you know, a whole stack of the best and the brightest, like David.
At least infectious disease
medical doctors, and ones that specialize in pathology, specialize in infectious diseases, and I'd have the best and the brightest sitting there. That's the team that's going to deal with this. Okay, not politics. I'm sorry.
I want to ask David, why didn't Donald do this? Because David knows.
Well, I predicted in my biography of Trump that if we had a pandemic, or as I put it, a virus hopscotching around the globe on jetliners,
yes,
that he would be absolutely incapable of handling this. And
you put that in your book? You put that in the book before this happened?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I can read the book again.
Well, when I was in college in the 60s, one of the things I studied with a bunch of bureaucrats, because I knew I was going to be writing about government, so I wanted to learn how they're taught, was the fact that we were going to have another pandemic. We had one in 57, 58 when Eisenhower was president. It was rather minor. And we've had several dry runs in this century, or small runs. But Trump did more than just allow John Bolton to get rid of the pandemic team in the White House and the national security staff. The outgoing administration ran a series of training exercises for the incoming administration. That happens every time we change presidents. And one of the training exercises was how to deal with a pandemic. They wrote a guidebook for them. Here's how to deal with a pandemic.
Right.
Obviously, that had no impact. And let me tell you the news that Bloomberg just broke while we were speaking. Bloomberg had reporters go through the death data in New York City for a number of years. New York City in the spring should have had, and remember the first recorded deaths in New York weren't until February.
Right.
New York should have had 8,000 deaths in the first 3 months of this year. It had 32,000, 4 times as many. The number of deaths we're reporting is a serious undercount of the actual level of death, and it'll be probably several years before we get accurate counts. But the 81,000 number, rounding it, for as of yesterday for the U.S. is obviously quite low. Based on other data I've read and some work done by 2 guys who write for DC Report and are numbers nuts. It seems to be pretty clear that the count at this point is over 120,000.
Yeah, yeah. And see, I believe in what I call the ringer theory. Okay, if you're a gamer, you believe in what they call the ringer. So, and I learned that a long time ago when I was in college. There was a chess tournament I wanted to win called the Pan American Intercollegiate. We didn't have the talent at the University of South Florida to do it, so I got scholarshiped two of the best players in the Larry Christensen, Ron Henley. We won it. Then I was playing trivia up in Whatcom County, okay? And we could never win this trivia contest. I brought a guy in called Ken Jennings, okay? Who, by the way, if you ever found Ken,
Jeopardy.
okay, Ken knows me really well. Okay, because I called him. I said, Ken, I'm having this big problem. I can't win this trivia tournament. Can you come and play on our team? So Ken comes in from Seattle because he had moved back from Salt Lake to Seattle and played on our trivia team. Lo and behold, we won the trivia tournament.
Nick. Would you stack that deck or what?
Then I wanted to win a foosball tournament, okay? And I was good, but I wasn't that great. So I brought in this guy, Carl Miller, who was world foosball champion. We won the foosball tournament. When you want to win something, you find the best person that you can and bring them on your team to support your team going forward. And I'm sorry, Mike Pence may be a great governor. He may be you may love him. Whoever's out there loves him. Good for you. Okay, but he is not a medical doctor. He's the wrong person to have on your medical team. Wrong guy leading it.
Leaders, you don't have to have a vice president as a medical doctor.
Yeah,
as a leader, you hire the team.
Sure.
You
And the
hire
politicians,
the IT team to build your IT product. You hire the medical
politicians don't necessarily have to be the best in medical. And even Bill Gates, as smart as this guy is, everybody goes, okay, Bill Gates, and you can see it on the internet, played the world champion, Magnus Carlsen. Okay, it wasn't even close. Magnus slaughtered him in 90 seconds and maybe 9 moves. It was horrible. Okay, Bill Gates may be the best computer guy in the world, maybe 100, but he can't beat a world champion chess player at chess. It's just never going to happen. So what you want to do is bring those people on your team. Then you win. Okay, and that's not what happened.
And Nick, we also had a CDC team in Wuhan that in late November, said there are indications that we have a novel coronavirus that will spread. So the administration was told about that right away. The administration has known since late November. And the problem is that Donald is incapable of processing information that contradicts what he believes. And I've observed this in him as long as I've known him, which is almost 32 years now. If there's something that contradicts what he believes, he has to dismiss it. He has to call it a hoax. He has to say you're a liar. So.
Oh, that must be Donald calling you right now.
Yeah, stop calling me at home.
Because you know we're being hot. So that's probably Donald calling you.
Yeah, that's Donald calling you.
Lighten up, buddy, lighten up, or blah blah blah. But the thing is, unfortunately, the medical situation has become a political and economic situation, and that really bothers me because Dr. Reckner, I would prefer to find the best pathologist, best immunologist, best virologist in the country, and bring them on and have a team of them. I wouldn't have one. I'd have a group of them, and then when you have a question, turn it over to them to answer, not try to be a medical practitioner.
Right. But here's the question today. Where do we go from now? Where is that team? How would we put this team together? Because we're not talking about distant history. Here we are going through it right now. What should we do today?
Yeah. Oh, no. That's an absolutely good point.
And we have to we also have to look at who do we want to do it, right? Because right now we're not being led right. Our numbers are way off whack. And I heard some things over the weekend that seriously disturbed me. And part of it was, no, I'm not going to wear a mask. Why should I wear a mask?
Yeah,
I don't care. I don't care that I spread what I have to anyone.
Right. And this is
everyone else is wearing a mask, so why should I?
In the studies I've seen, Dr. Reckner, if I wear a mask and they wear a mask, it's 1.2% probability if one person's infected that I get infected. If one person wears a mask, the other doesn't, it's 5.6. If you don't both wear a mask, you're going to both get sick. I mean, that's what studies say. And so I wear a mask and I wear gloves. I hate doing it. But the thing is, at the same time, how can I read that study and not?
But it's the data shows that the cultures who followed that practice and enforced it, not just followed it, but enforced it. Because that's what people were telling me over the weekend here in the U.S. was, well, in other countries, they penalize you. And, they don't penalize us here. So I'm not going to do it. And I'm like, fine, be a spreader. But in other countries that we show data, the death rates are this compared to ours.
Absolutely.
And so this is what we have to look at, not just the data itself, but the culture and the laws that enforce that data, the laws that made that impact.
I have an N95 mask. I have latex gloves that I put on when I go out, and I take them off, throw them away. Okay. So
I have a 45 gun. Maybe that might work. No,
yeah, but that doesn't.
You can put an N95.
Michigan guns don't listen to viruses. I'm sorry, they don't really care. You can bring all the guns you want to the Capitol. It will not make a difference.
None of that protesting helped.
I saw that. That's
all
insane.
it did was depress the doctors. Do you know that all of that protesting has caused the doctors to become very depressed? Did you know that?
Yeah, I mean, at best. But
I don't want my doctors depressed.
Okay, well, we have seen Dr. Ratner. Okay, part of it's the problems that we have in leadership. Part of the problem is the medical community not stepping up, and part of it is actually our community. In other words, the American culture. Okay, in and of itself, which is a culture of rebellion. Because let's face it, all our ancestors came over from somewhere because they rebelled, except for maybe the Native Americans. And how well did they do? They got smallpox, and we eradicated them. Think about that one. Okay, the thing is, so we come from a hereditary nature of rebellion, and it just doesn't work well against a virus. So virus
generation.
Yeah, we're like, hey, we want our freedoms, but
well, there's also another point to remember about this. We don't just have freedoms to do things; we have freedoms from things. Remember FDR's freedom from want, freedom from hunger sort of speech. And I'm getting emails and direct messages on Twitter from people about the government can't do this; it's illegal. Congress passed a law in 1796 on quarantines. In 1826, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the use of quarantines. This is before the germ theory of disease. Upheld the use of quarantines as a proper exercise of the police power of the state. And when people show up to a demonstration brandishing military-style assault rifles, that's not free speech. That's terroristic intimidation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, not a constitutional scholar, but
posted over and over and over.
But see what I think, David, is what's going to happen is that since we're reopening, or whatever they call it, the economy, or people are going to disregard this, that we're going to be in for another month of really some pretty bad health situations are going to take place in June. In other words, it's going to get worse in June. The only thing I think that can save us is that the heat does have a factor in terms of mitigating viruses. And that may take place in July and August. Okay, by that time, we just got to see what's going to happen in September or October, because by October, it'll come back with a vengeance, because the U.S., our culture is not designed to do well with viruses.
And here's some things, and this is what we talked about from day one with some of the doctors that were kind enough to be coming on our show for, since all of this began. And they're really, really experienced doctors. But this whole virus is still unknown, and probably will be for more than a year or two. Thinking that we can come up with a vaccine like that, that's not the right mental state of mind. We have to learn how to figure out how to live with it and treat it. And we're already hearing news, excuse me for saying duh, but, we're saying, oh my gosh. Well, people, we've got a third series of the virus coming out, the third strain. It's just going to keep happening. So I think what we need to do is stop spending our money on things that are just not going to happen.
Right. I think they've found more than 24 variants of this virus already, which isn't surprising. But there are a lot of Ankit had his hand up for a while, and I missed it.
Yeah, we have to hear from 1,300,000,000 people, 1.3 billion people.
I have a question for David. That there's a news going on YouTube, and a lot of WhatsApp videos are also circulating. that US and China had a trade deal in December. They have signed a deal, and in that deal, there is one point which is added at the last moment, which mentioned about pandemic. Do you have any idea about that?
No, I don't. I'm sorry. I don't. It's probably one of the things I should keep up with, but there's a limit. Even though I get up at 4 or 5 in the morning, there's a limit.
I got that news from multiple sources from different countries, and it says that China have, at the 0 hour of that contract, they just added a line which is about pandemic, and that says that there would not be any change if there is a pandemic.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Both Reuters and the Times of India are probably much better sources on that. The Times of India is often right on top of things faster than anybody else. They must have a large staff around the country, or they pay very close attention.
But I have a video. I have a video as well. I'll share you offline so we can just have a look and let's see if we can discuss on that.
Yeah, David, what's your next book going to be on? Pandemics or viruses?
Well,
or
the next book is supposed to be my proposal for a whole new tax code that is doable in the 21st century because we have a digital economy. Mm-hmm. You know, we have a 19th century tax code.
Thank you.
And we need it's damaging our economy. It's taxing some businesses heavily and others not at all. It's actually a profit center, as I proved years ago for.
Mm-hmm. Donald Trump is keep trying to get a hold of
it. I wish Donald would still call me at home as he used to do often, but since he got to the White House, he hasn't rung me again. Anyhow, I'm sorry.
There's one more thing. There's one more thing which is going around that before pandemic. A lot of countries or superpowers, maybe UK, US, and countries like China, they might not be trusting each other on some platform, and they might not be trusting on some other platforms because there is a lot of friction going around. But what happened after pandemic or during pandemic? Are we able to trust each other in terms of politicians between different countries? Because I see there's a different ball game going on where who is on which side and who is winning. What do you think?
I think pandemics historically have been transitory events. I can't find any evidence that the 1917-1920 pandemic that killed Donald Trump's grandfather had any lasting effects. In fact, I asked one of my 8 grown children today, do you remember growing up hearing anything about, because of that, this is how it shaped your life? And no, we had the 57-58, minor pandemic. We've had in this century, MERS, SARS, swine flu. I think these are transitory events. But government shouldn't treat them as transitory events. This should be a wake-up call that we've got 7.8 billion people now, not the 1.5 billion we had a century ago. We were going to have more events like this. So we need to have more stockpiled goods. We need to replace those periodically so we don't end up, as the U.S. government did, with a lot of rotted masks. A lot of what government needs to do is boring stuff, making sewage plants run, making water plants run. We need to recognize that, and we need to make sure that our government anticipates these things, which our government did before Trump. Barack Obama was apparently just absolutely scared out of his socks by what was the potential of the swine flu, and his administration then began doing some things that should have been done a long time ago. But I would be very surprised there's a long-term lasting effect. There are going to be some effects. I have a son who's a truck driver. He points out to me that, yes, he'll have work, but there'll be so many more people looking for truck driving jobs that's going to push wages down.
Right.
So he makes, I don't know, $60,000 a year or something. That's going to shrivel. Yep. People who work in airlines, the airline industry itself is saying it's going to be a decade, they believe, before they get back to the level they have now. So there'll be big long-term economic effects for this. And some people, probably Nick and Kimberly and me, if your income isn't affected and your expenses have plummeted, as mine have, mm-hmm. You're going to come out the other side of this if you don't get sick with a stronger balance sheet. Maybe your investments will be worth less, but if you didn't sell, the 1,000 shares of X company you had are still 1,000 shares.
Right.
And so the effect on lower income, lesser educated people who do manual labor type jobs in America, service jobs, that's going to be horrible for them.
Right.
And it's going to lead to enormous pressure for social change in this country. And I hope one of the things it leads to is, this is where I think the Democrats are being idiots, absolute idiots. They should pick up the mantle of universal no out-of-pocket health care and say, we're going to take this off the back of small business. And people are going to feel free to leave your company and go somewhere else. You're not going to have the risk. You're not going to have the paperwork. You're not going to have the annoyance, because we're going to go to a new system. It doesn't have to be Medicare for all, but a universal no out-of-pocket care system. Or as Donald Trump himself said to me 30 years ago, healthcare should be like the roads. When you need them, you just use them.
And healthcare, not insurance. Okay, people.
There's no need for insurance.
Healthcare, not insurance. This is what I never understood. The
insurance is risk spreading and risk shifting, and there's no reason to have health insurance. I must say, however, even the systems in Europe have some health insurance components, but that's because they just haven't been willing to go full in, no out-of-pocket care, and you need to do in that dental care, because we're learning more and more over time that poor dental care is related to heart disease, lung, liver disease, etc. But the cheapest and most effective way to do it is on a universal basis, and probably to finance it off a non-progressive tax. You could do it as a tax on food. You can do it like the Nordics do on a value-added tax. But the reality is that once you eliminate the very few outliers, there are a few people who will live to be 90 years old and not literally ever have a fever their entire lives. They will never be sick. I know one of those people. When he got an old age condition and I was told, get out to see your mentor, he's going to die in 3 weeks, he hung on for 9 months. On the other hand, we have people like Donald Trump's grandnephew that are $1 million a year medical cases the day they're born for the rest of their lives. Throw out those very few outliers, and the difference between what Nick and you and I will spend on healthcare in America, bupkis. Right. So let's just take advantage of mass purchasing power. And when I hear somebody say, well, how would we pay the doctors? You know, corporate America figured out how to pay people a long time ago. Government knows how to pay people. They don't seem to have any trouble hiring police officers in Chicago and Los Angeles and school teachers in Seattle. We figure these things out. What does it take? Yeah. And economic theory tells us you pay the lowest price necessary to attract and retain the talent, a rule we violate only in the case of CEOs of publicly traded companies, where the job seems to be to bid up the price as high as you can.
It happens in sports also.
Yes.
But see, what happens is, David, and this is a problem that I've seen in the United States, and my wife has told me that too, and both of us have masters in tax. My wife has her master's in tax from USC. Mine was from University of Denver, and I've been teaching at Northeastern University's graduate tax program for 10 years now. But one problem that we have is, unfortunately, a lottery system in the United States. Winner takes all. In other words, if you happen to be that sports figure who's just a little bit better than everybody else, you make 14 or 30 million a year. But if you're a little less, then you make 25, 35,000. And so what happens is the winner takes all the bananas and everybody else is left with peanuts at best. And that's been our economic system for, I don't know, the last 30 plus years since since Dwight Eisenhower, who used to have a 90% tax on people like that, was eliminated by your friend Ronald Reagan, who decided to and we saw that in 1981 with ERTA, the Economic Recovery Tax Act, where all of a sudden this huge 70% marginal tax dropped down to like 28% overnight. And so what happens is we created a winner-take-all economy, and we've had that ever since.
Yeah, the day that Reagan signed that law, I was covering the LAPD, not crime, but the LAPD itself, or the LA Times. And I was driving near LAX airport, and they came on NPR radio, and they were doing a live thing about it. And I said, gee, if only my father were alive, 100% disabled veteran dad, I could go and tell him I'm now going to pay taxes at the same marginal rate as the Rockefellers.
That's right. I mean, but that it's been that way ever since. And so what has happened is we've skewed where was it? The top 1% own 70% of all the financial assets in the United States. I mean,
actually, they own 90%.
Well, the top 10% own 90%. Yeah. And the real problem is the average American who doesn't know it, they're basically busted with nowhere to go, and the tax system has kind of done that over a 30-year.
No, that's been the argument in my book Free Lunch and a lot of other stuff, that the reason that we have this inequality, there is some inequality created by people like Bill Gates who invent a better mousetrap.
Well, he won the lottery.
Yeah, and I'm all for it. If you can, in the competitive marketplace, come up with a better service or a product and make a lot of money, good for you.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we collect all our taxes from you. We don't let you defer your taxes till you die, and then let you give it to a foundation with the government not collecting anything.
Sure. Well, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah,
the private foundation is the way out of having to pay any federal state tax.
I did a statistical anomaly in the IRS data from 1961 that lets us measure the top 398 taxpayers. And for 24 years, we got a report on the top 400. So statistically, it's immaterial. And what I showed was that from 1961 till the last year they did this, 2014, the tax rate of the top 400 taxpayers fell by well more than half. The tax rate of the bottom 90% of Americans went up 20%, and that's before counting Social Security increases, which are even more. Yep. And the after-tax gain was something like, I'm doing this from memory, but I think it's $36 to one or $78 to one after tax. Mm-hmm. And then we have companies and people who back in 2002, did a front page story showing that some corporations were making a profit off the tax. The Times got all these complaints. What crazy person am I? That's ridiculous. And then Congress did the biggest study the Joint Committee on Taxation has ever done, 1,800 words, 3 volumes, and showed that not only was I right, but it was worse than I said, and something I predicted there also turned out to be true. The Times, of course, wouldn't let me put a prediction in the paper, but I said, I predict to you, if we could ever see the internal records of Enron and GE and other companies, they would refer in emails to their tax departments as profit centers.
Yep.
Enron not only did that, they had a stamp.
Yep. Well, I mean, in Microsoft's home office, when I was up in Seattle, they had 400 tax attorneys working there. 400. Yeah. Now, what do you need 400 tax attorneys? Well, they're supporting, and Eric Swinebold, the guy who's a professor at USC, the double Dutch Irish sandwich, which he writes extensively on. Right. Well, the double Dutch was done by Apple, Microsoft, all the big corporations. And when I tell my graduate students, they're going like, huh, what's that? I said, well, we're taking advantage of the Irish Treaty in the United States, corporate America. But what also happens is not only what we have is a concentration of wealth in very few corporations and frankly, very few individuals, which give them enormous amount of power to the point where Facebook, and I'm screaming about right now, because I get too many correspondents go back and forth. That's their complaint. I talk to too many people. And you know what they do, David? They shut me down. They automatically midstream, I get shut down by Facebook. Seriously. In other words, I'm getting shut down by Facebook all the time. Not because I'm saying anything bad or wrong. I just talk too much, which if people know me, that's not a surprise. Yeah. Okay. And I'm going like,
I want to address something that David brought up just a few minutes ago about changing the tax reform. How can explain this so that other viewers can understand this? Because not everybody understands the difference and everything. But how can that help us economically come out of the crisis that we're in right now?
So one of the things that's going on is many corporations, not all by any means, it depends on how you're situated, but many corporations and many individuals qualify for tax deals under which they earn money today, but they pay the tax 30 years or more from now. And that is the equivalent of the government loaning you tax-free, interest-free, loaning you interest-free the amount of the tax that you owed. So if you owed $1 million and you didn't have to pay it for 30 years, the government just loaned you $1 million with no payments due for 30 years. Now go forward 30 years. Inflation has eroded the value of the $1 million. And you, by investing that money, can pay your $1 million tax, and depending on your rate of return, you can have anywhere from $2 million to $1 billion if you earn a high enough rate of return. And government is starved then for revenue, so it borrows more money. That crowds out other kinds of spending. Government doesn't invest in the future. where I live in Rochester, New York, a new book by 2 MIT professors says we are the #1 city in America to revive the economy of the country because of all the high-tech and diversified knowledge that we have in Rochester. We have more students per capita than Boston, Cambridge. And to do that, the government would need to spend money, as it did in the 50s and the 60s, pre-Reagan, on science. The space program at one point was more than 1% of the economy, but it literally got us to the moon in the 60s.
Exactly.
And if we were to put more money into things, your issue, Kimberly, it's very important that we're not really doing anything about using technology to reduce domestic violence. That should be a major government-funded project because the government will save money. I know there's a vast range of estimates, but I think the U.S. Justice Department's estimate of $8 million for every murder,
it is,
on average, is a reasonable number. I was shocked when I first read it, but after reading the methodology, that's a reasonable number. My goodness, for a few $100s a month, we could eliminate an $8 million expense, never mind the humanity of it. And there are all sorts of problems. Roads are falling apart. Bridges are falling apart. Our internet is a joke compared to, say, South Korea. It's because of monopoly practices. It's priced at far above what people pay there. And we could do all sorts of wonderful things, but we got to fix our tax code. And today, a study came out that I was writing up when I broke off for this by some accounting professors showing that, as I predicted, the 2017 Trump tax cut has not only not led to increased domestic capital investment, which was what they claimed, because more domestic capital investment is more jobs, it's led to companies increasing their investment offshore. Of course it did, because of the way it was written. And unfortunately, the journalists who covered it are generalists. I mean, they don't have the deep knowledge of tax. And you know, Nick, how difficult tax is. I mean, it's mind-numbingly difficult to understand. And you're a practitioner. I'm just a theorist. I have a much easier burden than you do. But, they just accept what they're told. And Trump and the Senate Republicans said, oh, this will lead to this. And it didn't. Yeah. It led to the opposite. So the biggest business in the world is tax. It's about 40% of the world economy. If you were sent here from another planet as part of an exploratory team before we made contact, and you were head of the economics team, you would begin your report back home by saying, the creatures on this planet have something they call tax, and it's 40% of their activity economically, and you would think, therefore, they love it, but actually they're taught to hate it. And it achieves all these great things for them. It extends lives through research into public health and building sewage plants and things like that. But it produces all this hatred because we don't think about it in terms of how to make us better off by using the mass purchasing power of the state and by focusing investments on things that business investors, people like us, would not fund because they're too risky.
Right. Yeah. And so yeah, and we do. I think we're going to see something like that in 2021, but mainly because also look at our GDP and our deficit. That ratio is going to go way out of proportion, like this year. And to get it anywhere close to in line, they're going to have to overhaul the tax code. And I think it was somebody who was a very wealthy, influential person saying, hey, look, we're going to have to start we're basically have to start taxing the upper middle class and the upper class. Yeah. You can't let them get this free ride, which is true. You can, let's face it, you can accumulate a large amount of deferred wealth by not taking income. In other words, you just keep accumulating assets. And so we get a very disproportionate amount of wealth in a very few people, to the extent where I have to serve only a very few people because half the population, here's the other argument. Well, the other half doesn't pay taxes. But David, they don't have any money. 50% of our population have a zero net worth.
I'm going to put up a chart for you in just a second that will shock you.
Yeah. Well, half of our population, ANKIT, seriously, half the population of the United States has zero or negative.
I'll tell you what, I'm just not particularly fond of our IRS laws. I've been under audit for a while, and I've been through an audit before, went through it just nice and sweet. They've been so rude, hateful, they tell me, yeah, we could be hostile to people anytime. I've got it all on recording, all of this on recording. And all they wanted to do is they wanted to disallow certain of my deductions that I've been allowed to have over the years. They want to get it off of my chart. And I'm like, no, I've had it for years. So it's just, I want to get rid of them and that infrastructure. We don't need to have hateful people taking money from us and taxes. To me, that's hostile tax collection. That's why we came to this country, was to get rid of that.
It's problematic. Yes. Okay. Lynn has joined us from the dollar store.
So, do you have it? Ankit can help you.
I'll send it to Ankit right now.
Okay. We'll get it up.
Lynn on the show to share a little bit about how to save money.
We'll get back with David. Lynn, speaking about dollars.
Stay home.
Talk about the dollar store and how people can save money. By the way, important part of financial planning, save money.
Absolutely, which is, of course, financial education is the mission of Money Masters, which owns IBM.TV. And I'm really a big proponent of financial education for young people to try and help them get out of poverty and or even if they're not in poverty, learn how to use money. Learn how to save money. And that's what one of the things the dollar store can do, which is why we're sponsoring Money Masters. The dollar store, people can save tons of money. So as I've said before, but I'll say it again, oh my goodness gracious, there are the Minion napkins. As said before, we deliver for free for orders over $25. Half of our profit goes to Money Masters. The products are fantastic. There's a cosmetic product that one of the big stores, somebody by the name that starts with an A, I can't remember what their name is.
Amazon company, that big Amazon company that you can't say who their name is, but as big
that's
as
right.
Amazon. Okay.
They sell for a product for $67. Identical product on our store is $2. So
is it a beauty product?
I'm sorry?
Is it a beauty product?
It is. And I'm going to find out tonight. We have a meeting. I will have the name for you tomorrow. But it is identical because I know a group of the people looked it up and compared it to what Amazon was selling it for. And we were significantly cheaper, and Amazon charges you $4 for shipping. So just think about it. This product you can get actually for free because buy other things that you need, and the $5 that you save on or the money you save on shipping basically pays for the product. Also, and I did mention the $5, we have a rewards program. So just by signing up to become a customer, you do get $5 of discounts. And every purchase that you make is a $1 discount for every $10 that you do spend. So suppose somebody spends $50, they take the $5 discount that they get just by becoming a customer, cost them $45, no delivery charge, and they pick up another $5 worth of discounts to apply to their next purchases. It's a pretty great deal. So right now we're only available here in the United States. Unfortunately, we're not in India yet, but that's a conversation I've been having with Rex Mehta, who founded the company. So when that happens, you'll be pushing the green button and it will take you to India. Or maybe it will be a blue button because we'll have to keep India and the United States separate.
But if you go to IBM.TV, it's as simple as clicking on the big green button. It takes you straight to the site. Usually, I think I got a program to take you straight to the toilet paper if it's there. I just thought that was funny. But the thing is that if you shop the dollar store, why drive over there, risk getting infected with massive amount of people trying to get back out there? Just do it from home. That time is money. We learned that the first thing I learned in business, time is money. That you save gas, you save Just many other ways. You can get free shipping if you buy $25 worth of stuff. So if you shop once a month like I do, it's easier to do. But look, folks, we were talking about dental care, dental being very, very important, that if we don't take care of our mouths, there are other problems that we could have. They've got toothbrushes, the dental pick with the flosses. We got soaps. That's not dental. But they got toothpaste. But you don't need to go out shopping for all of this stuff. It's all right here. Be smart with your money, right? This is, don't go out and spend a lot of money when you shop. You can shop at the dollar store. That's where I shop. What's that? Millionaire
That's
Mind?
the
Millionaire Mind
by Professor Dr. Tom Stanley. This should be required reading of all high school students in this country, because Dr. Stanley actually did a lot of research, created the formula. If you want to be wealthy in the United States, you got to be able to save money. But this is an excellent book. Unfortunately, we can't have him on our show because he actually passed away several years ago. He was in an auto accident in Atlanta, but he taught at Georgia State for years, and it should be required reading. Another required reading. Oh, here it is. The Making of Donald Trump. And we know the author of that one.
Chart up. Let me explain what's going on here.
My favorite is Perfectly
And
Legal.
of course, I've got to have this
My
one.
first
Perfectly
favorite.
Legal.
Thank you.
That's addictive.
If you look at the chart I just put up from the St. Louis Fed,
Yes.
this is total demand deposits, checking accounts, as a practical matter. And you'll notice that after the Great Recession, that number suddenly starts rising. You can take it all the way back to 75. It's a flat line pretty much back to 75. Then look what's happened this year. It takes off like a rocket because we just injected all this money. Now, corporations are going to draw that money down. But that's an astonishing growth at the very end there in deposits, which are measured weekly. So there's no shortage of cash. It's how it's distributed that is a real fundamental problem. There is one issue about the wealth argument you guys are making, and that is, so long as people only earn subsistence wages, they're not going to have a capacity to save. There's a new measure of poverty in America that I was the first person to write about, I think 6 years ago now, called ALICE. Assets Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. So it's people who are working but don't have assets and they don't have savings. And in Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, metropolitan areas, to get out of poverty for a family of four takes about $60,000. The official poverty level is $25,000. In Rochester, where I live, Rochester, New York, every sixth person lives at less than half the official poverty level. So that means we have families of four in Rochester trying to get by on less than $1,020 a month. We need to increase the incomes of people at the bottom. And if we do that, people who own businesses will, as a class overall, get wealthier and be better off because people will have more money to buy services and products and have a bigger capacity to save.
Yeah, and I also think we need to give them financial education, which is one reason the books like The Millionaire Mind, which